Hi, everyone. I'm Julia from Unthinkable. Today, I have a really exciting guest. This is something that I've thought about for a long time, and I'm actually pretty stoked to flip the tables on this one. I am going to introduce Andy Steele to you. Andy Steele is currently the Director of Operations for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth and the host of the AE podcast 9/11 Freefall. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing from the University of South Florida. Before he joined AE, he was a member of the Peace Corps. He served in Uzbekistan teaching English. He's been volunteering for 9/11 Truth since 2001 and was integral in the orchestration of the highest viewed video on C-SPAN's YouTube channel featuring Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Andy is a contributing writer for AE 9/11 Truth, as well as a number of alternate news sites, and his work has been featured in magazines abroad. Andy is the graphic designer, a graphic designer and content creator behind many of AE's publications on YouTube and their website. Finally, and most importantly, Andy Steele is the author of the graphic novel Born on 9/11 Truth, available at the AE store, which is a fictional tale sure to inspire and educate you about why the fight for 9/11 Truth still matters. I'm going to bring him on. Andy, welcome to Unthinkable.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so happy that you have joined our podcast family. I think it brings a whole new breath of fresh air to this entire issue that we've been at for so long. So thank you for helping us out.
Well, it's my pleasure. And obviously, we work together in a small scale. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to know how to do any of this. So I appreciate your help, your guidance. You are someone with many talents, and I'm hoping to showcase some of those for the audience today. So we're going to be talking about 9/11. We should just start with the basic question going forward. Where were you?
Where was I? I was in Tampa, Florida, and I remember this because we had an issue. I had just come back from China a week before, and I went to go take a shower, and all of a sudden, all the tiles just fell off the wall while I was in there. It was almost like a bomb exploded or something. But no, it was just really cheap tiling work. And, so yeah, our shower had no tiles. It was just open grout or whatever goes behind it. So we had called the tile guy, or called the apartment complex to send a tile guy. He was supposed to come on, and I remember the notice, Tuesday, September 11th. So that morning, we were having a debate about who's going to skip class and stick around to, sort of babysit the tile guy, because you don't want a stranger alone in your apartment. And we decided I would. And the TV was on, but nobody was paying attention to it. My friend was going to leave. He had an appointment of some kind that morning, and I was about to turn the TV off. I was looking at him, had my finger on the button. My friend's like, wait. And I look, and there's a hole in the World Trade Center, and NBC News is reporting it. So, we're sitting there kind of watching, and, I'm like, this was, obviously very horrible news that you want to, follow. But I still had to get my shower in for the morning. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and do that. And then I go into the shower and I hear my friend go, "Oh my God." So, I get the towel around and I'm just like, what happened? I think I still had shampoo in my hair. He's like, this other plane just crashed into the other building. I'm like, oh my God. So when I came out and was done, the tile guy was there, and my friend had to go to his appointment at the university, but he said every TV at the college, it was on this. And I basically just watched it with the tile guy. He did the work, but he was kind of following it through me that day. And it's kind of weird too, because I don't remember this tile guy's name. I barely remember what he looked like. Yeah. But his 9/11 story probably is, I was doing this tile work for these kids and college kids, and that's where I was. So there's some stranger out there whose 9/11 story I am a part of. So that's it.
Well, that's kind of how it was for most Americans, right? I mean, we were just going about our lives. My story is I was at school, so it was my teachers. They had all the TVs on, and we went from class to class. It was just wherever we were, whatever was going on, normal human life. Yours happened to be, I'm a college student, and we need the tile guy to come. So that's your rando 9/11 story. Now let's do a sub story. Where were you when you heard about Building 7 for the first time?
Well, now I'm camped into the couch, like around 5:20 in the afternoon, and most of everything had already happened throughout that day, but nobody stopped watching TV for weeks, because every little development was getting reported on. And this, I mean, the way you knew that it was really serious is that little ticker at the bottom of the screen. I've never seen that before, right? And then it never left after 9/11. Then they started putting advertisements in it and stuff. But
you're talking about the words that are rolling by, right?
Yeah, the words that are rolling by, and it was like, oh my God, we'd never seen anything like this before, in American society, and all the TV networks got taken over by the three big ones. So I'm watching this, and I can't remember what network it was, but it was the Ashley Banfield video.
Oh yeah.
The third, and then she says to the lady, watch out for your baby.
Catalina is her name. Yeah.
Yeah. And she says, watch out for your baby. And my friend came back in the room and he said, what just happened? And I said, oh, another one of the buildings, or they brought down one of the buildings to control the fire or something. And, I wasn't even thinking logically, because you can't just bring down a building in the middle of on short notice with an alleged terrorist attack happening next door. But I was just trying to rationalize what I saw. So intuitively, I thought it was a controlled demolition, but it took years afterwards for somebody to say, well, no, it looks like a controlled demolition, and that shouldn't be, unless the government knows what's going to happen. And, for me to put two and two together and realize that, there's a problem with this.
It's occurring to me that there could be someone watching right now who actually doesn't know what Building 7 is. So on September 11th, like Andy said, at 5:20, a 47-story high-rise building collapsed over free fall speed for 8 stories and collapsed into its own footprint in a very characteristic, what appears to be a controlled demolition of an intact building. And so we're going to be talking a lot about Building 7 today, because it is one thing that, at least from watching you as an observer, Andy, it seems to have maybe been the thing. Was that the hook that kind of got you on 9/11? Because that seems to be something that you come back to over the years in a lot of your work and a lot of things you talk about. Was that integral into you getting involved?
Well, it's the smoking gun. I think it is for just about everybody, because everything else, the Twin Towers, you can say, well, the airplanes hit it. You don't know what's going on inside the building and such. But Building 7 never had a single airplane hit it. All right, had some random office fires from the fall of Tower 1. But random office fires cannot do that to a steel frame high rise. It had never happened before or after September 11th. And just to fall suddenly at 5:20 in the afternoon, like a rock. And when most people watch it fall, they intuitively think that it's a controlled demolition. Years later, flash forward, I'm working with AE, we're at the EIA convention. You show people Building 7 coming down, and you say, what do you think brought that building down? Always begin with a question. You don't want to tell them your punchline until they've already kind of committed to a position. And they say, oh, it looks like they put some bombs in it or something, or like a demolition explosive type. Then you tell them the story, you tell them the controversy, and they sort of back off, most of them. The ones who don't sign our petition, and that's very helpful to us. But intuitively, when you watch this building come down, it looks just like a controlled demolition. So, I came across videos about this purely by accident one night. I didn't choose to take the red pill. It's like it fell into a jar of M&Ms. And I accidentally ate it.
And joke from the Matrix, the red pill or the blue pill.
Exactly. But I didn't get the choice. I was looking for something else. Some hero truther of the time put this video in there. And it was like I went down a rabbit hole. I just could not stop thinking about this. And there were other things going on. And what was interesting is that the truth movement was beginning to gain steam, a little bit of steam. And you started seeing like this being covered on mainstream media, but obviously not in a positive way. They were trying to squelch any questions about this. And these were really reasonable questions regarding the fall of the buildings, regarding other elements of September 11th. And to see the way that the mainstream media was acting about this issue, about this event that killed 3,000 Americans and people from other nationalities too, but killed 3,000 people on that day. I thought was incredibly suspicious. Like, for an institution that claims that it's not hiding anything, you certainly are acting like you're hiding something. And so that just kind of drew me in even more. And, the rest is history. I just got involved and started posting about this on MySpace, and led to me talking to you here.
Some people might not know what that is. That was a social media platform about 15, 20 years ago.
I liked MySpace. It was so much better than Facebook.
I liked it because it was set up kind of like your own little web page, and you could display what you wanted about yourself. I did have a MySpace. I can't remember what mine was called. But I mean, you took a very different path than me. I didn't really use the World Wide Web or the internet to communicate with anybody or learn much about 9/11 until YouTube really was popular. And for me, that happened about 07, 08. So you got involved with this cause when?
I would say 06, 07. I didn't want to commit to this because, and as I've gotten older, I've gotten to be a little bit more sympathetic with the general public that isn't ready to come out and say, I think it was a controlled demolition, because that is a pretty big thing to commit to, especially back then, because, we're in 2024 now. There's some decades between us and the event. But around that time, like 2006, it was like it just happened.
Yeah.
Bush was still president. We were involved in these wars. And so to go out and say something like that sounded crazy. So I can sympathize a little bit more, because if you just hear it's a controlled demolition, to the average person who's not interested in this kind of thing, who doesn't spend a lot of time on the internet looking up these kinds of, what the mainstream media likes to write off as conspiracy theories, it sounds crazy. But that is until you look at the evidence. And of course, when you start with Building 7, the free fall collapse of this building, and then you look into the Twin Towers, the fact that this top block cannot act as a pile driver, driving all the building all the way to the ground, destroying it, and then somehow committing suicide in the last few seconds so that we don't see it anymore on the pile at ground zero.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you start diving into all these little facts that 9/11 Truth has pulled out over the years. And you look at the University of Alaska study that pretty much refutes NIST conclusions. All right. Now, there's a lot of people who say, I think it's a controlled demolition. At this point, I don't say think whatsoever. I say, I know it was a controlled demolition. I know these buildings were blown up. I do sympathize with people who weren't as exposed to this back then. Today, I think this is the legacy of 9/11 Truth, is that even if we don't get a new investigation, which I think we will, I think this will be acknowledged and in the history books. All of the people watching this who have been working so hard to get this exposed are going to be vindicated. But even if we don't, the fact that we have put this out into the public consciousness, that we have spray painted, remember Building 7, all over the official story, we have made the public more vigilant, more aware, more questioning. And there are people out there, debunkers, who are going to talk about that negatively. Oh, look what you've done to society. I think it's a good thing. Yeah, there's some ugliness out there, right? But these are just the growing pains as we become a better and wiser people. So that is our legacy. That is what we accomplish when we're doing our outreach, doing our research, putting out videos like your show, and making our films and trying to get this information out there any way that we can. And it all starts with Building 7.
I appreciate that. For me, it's different. For me, it didn't start with Building 7 at all. It started with the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, I should say. That's what really got me on the hook. But I see how over time Building 7 was the smoking gun for you. And even throughout the journey of AE, it's been such a salient point that needs to be made and not forgotten, that that 47-story building came down in what appears to be a controlled demolition. And now, as you mentioned, through the University of Alaska Fairbanks study conducted by Dr. Leroy Halsey, it's been explored in a scientifically rigorous manner to the extent that it can be concluded that we don't just think it was a controlled demolition. We know and understand scientifically that it was. So I thank you for your work with AE, of course, but I want to get into, as you said, some of the ugliness, because I have a feeling that this probably hasn't been roses and sunshine for you every step of the way. I have a clip that I would like to talk about that I got my hands on where you are actually speaking to a reporter in New York City.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
All right. So let's watch it and then we're going to talk about it.
How you doing? I got a story for you. I got a peer-reviewed journal from all these scholars right here where they found active thermitic material in the dust of the World Trade Center. So they found unexploded nanothermite in the dust. So it's explosives in the dust of the World Trade Center. I also got this fact sheet here where we have evidence of controlled demolitions. Now, you ever heard of Building 7?
Yeah, you know, that's a story we're going to do today.
Why aren't you going to do that story?
Dude, what is this about?
What is this about? Well, I mean, don't you find it interesting that a steel frame skyscraper collapsed at free fall speed?
Ambush TV?
Well, yes, because the fact is that we need you, and you're complacent. You're not covering the story of the century.
Well, are you done? You know what?
And 9/11 is being. And I was told earlier by a journalist that we're just here to cover emotion today. Are you going to tell me that you're here just to cover emotion today too?
I'm going to tell you to fuck off.
Oh wow! Can I quote you? So you're not interested in a steel frame skyscraper collapsed for the first time ever on 9/11? Wasn't even hit by an airplane? In the meantime, in China, we have a building catching on fire and burning for 18 hours.
Do we?
Yeah, we do. You don't care about that? No journalistic curiosity?
No.
No?
I don't care about anything you're saying.
You don't care? And why don't you care?
Because you're just, what are you?
What am I? I'm a concerned citizen. I'm also I also represent over 1,500 architects and engineers.
Engaged with your bullshit. Right.
With my bullshit, I got over 1,500 architects and engineers that are calling for a new investigation of these buildings.
You're disinterested.
Who speaks for the dead? This is why everyone's turning off the mainstream media and listening to people like me, because I'm telling the truth. And you don't care, and you're just here to cover emotion.
John.
Don't worry, dude. You're doing a good job.
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
What are you doing?
Well, I got a paper here, and you might be concerned about this, where we have active...
I'm concerned about you just walking over that way. This is like a press frozen zone. You're not press.
Is there like a legal press zone?
Yeah, actually, see the press passes they have on their chest?
Yeah. I have unexploded explosives in the dust of the World Trade Center.
Let's take the unexplosive explosives right there.
So I'm telling you that I have evidence of a crime and you don't care?
No, not right now.
You don't care? I got evidence of controlled demolitions. I have a clear evidence of a crime here, right in my hands. Where's your proof? Here's your proof right here.
Yep.
You have beams shooting out over 600 feet at 50 miles an hour. So if it was a gravitational collapse, how did that happen? What explosive force caused that?
10 years later, still no answers. They just sit there drinking their coffee.
All in a day's work. All in a day's work. But it's not. You're not really working. I got to do your job for you.
Yep.
I got to come all the way down here to present a paper. In a perfect world, I should be able to just show that you would have some journalistic curiosity at least.
I should go get an application, see if I can work for them. Sit there and do nothing. They'll kick me out as soon as I start talking. Because I don't read a script. I don't read a teleprompter.
We're supposed to investigate crimes, not be complicit in them. Oh, it's WABC News told me to fuck off. Okay. WABC in New York.
Yep.
Fuck off.
YouTube is going to love that.
Wow.
That was me in a good mood.
Well, and I should have warned the viewers, normally on your interviews or anything I do, you know, we don't have any foul language, but he was the one that said it. I was watching that and I had a lot of emotion. Like I felt cringy. Like I knew you were being really courageous, but I knew that they in New York, there's just this mass, it's like a mob mentality. I mean, I've done street activism in New York City too, and it's so bizarre how you have like actual scientific facts in your hand. Then you're not talking about like pigs flying around with like unicorn horns or anything crazy or aliens or the earth being flat or whatever. And they just treat you like some pariah or a leper, like, oh, don't even listen or talk. You're just, it's automatic that they just shut you down. But you were tenacious.
Well, that was the culture of the whole cause back then. I mean, 9/11 Truth was built off of, like, yeah, some scholars. You had Stephen Jones out there giving his Building 7 presentation. You had Loose Change with that film, Dylan Avery, and being able to present the entire picture of September 11th. And there were, people out there talking from a very scholarly perspective and giving presentations. But a lot of what was on the internet was citizens doing these kinds of confrontations with people like Karl Rove, with people like Rudy Giuliani. So this was just like a day's work for any truther who happened to be doing their thing on that day. And yes, I mean, I think it's absolutely necessary. Now, some of this stuff has gotten a little out of control today with all the partisan politics. There's people who will go out and make a big deal out of nothing. There might be some kind of reference in a book at the high school, for instance, that wouldn't have been a big deal for the last couple of decades, but now because there's all this divide here in the country over these this culture war, if there's a reference in a book about gay people, for instance, some mom will get upset and she'll get her 15 minutes of fame going to the school board and raising a big fit or whatever. And, her side of the equation will do that. I don't like that. I don't like how this sort of culture has been hijacked by the culture wars and the partisan politics. But back then, when it was about investigating a crime, about the fact that we just got this whitewash of an investigation, and that the mainstream media was not only not talking about it, but that they were actively trying to cover it up, that they had this kind of attitude.
I mean, they're lying about it.
Yeah, as you can see displayed right there. I think this was absolutely necessary. And some of the measures that we've seen taken with the internet censorship, with some of the promotion of wedge issues, I personally believe, even though I don't have an internal memo where they're talking about it, but I personally believe that a lot of this has been pushed to try to dilute that kind of action that we saw happening at that time, where some of these people, like your Giuliani's, your Karl Rove's, other people in the Bush administration, could not go to give a speech without somebody interrupting it. And there's a time and place for everything. I don't recommend that everybody, do this. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. And also be ready to deal with consequences too.
Yeah, I mean, you had a cop talking to you at the end of that video we just saw. So there could have been consequences there if you didn't obey him.
I know how far I can go with cops, but I was kind of friendly. So yeah, but there was a lot of this going on here. Luke Rudowski, I remember, famously confronted a lot of people from some of these roundtable groups, like Council on Foreign Relations and whatnot, and he would actually run. He would run afterwards. They would chase him. I remember there was one, he's running into the subway station, and logically, I know he must have gotten away with the video because he was able to post it. We didn't have a cloud at the time. But you're still like cheering, like, get it, run. So it was good TV as well back then. But yeah, those were the old days.
The old days. So how did the old days turn into the AE days in your world? How did we go from, for example, that clip to you being involved with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, first as a volunteer, and now obviously you're in a bigger capacity, but just how did that transition happen with you getting involved with them at all?
What had happened is when I started off, I was all by myself. I had written an article about the Glenn Beck confrontation with Deborah Medina, where he, just completely trashed her because she wouldn't throw 9/11 truthers under the bus, and people thought she did. We've recently referenced this in an interview with Craig McKee on my show, but I wrote an article about it just as a lark. I sent it to InfoWars, and they published it. And I was
InfoWars.
InfoWars, yes. So I was a contributing writer there once. So they published it. I was like, hey, that's cool. Let me keep doing this. And I mainly focused on 9/11. I went down to an event. It was like some group was trying to create a 9/11 truth political party. I don't think it ever took off, but Richard Gage was there giving a presentation. And then they put out a call for volunteers to do this one thing. It was like to hold press conferences on the anniversary of 9/11 in front of your local courthouse. And I was like, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that one thing. So I volunteered to do it. I actually got on TV, which was just me, I think, luck, right? But they were like, hey, you got on TV. Why don't you volunteer with us more? So I was like, okay, I could. And then I did the volunteering for years. And then eventually, we had some successes, and they asked me to join the staff. And here I am.
So you were on the steps of your courthouse for...
It was like a plaza. It wasn't there was no courthouse steps. You could, it was all even planed, but there was like a plaza there, and I wore my little tie and everything. And I think I made some little what is that? Poster board presentation, visual aid thing. And I printed off some pictures of the towers and the squibs and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I read the thing that AE gave me, but it was funny because nobody showed up for this press conference except the media. And the camera guy recorded me doing it. And actually they didn't attack me for what I was doing, but they only ran it once. The way the local news went, they had a local news session at 5 o'clock, 5:30, and then 6, and then I think 6:30 is when the national news came on. And it was always like a rerun of each one, right? So anybody who missed it could catch up. And I only got on the 5 o'clock one. They took it out of 5:30 and 6 o'clock, but I was able to get it off the internet, and I have that on some hard drive somewhere. So yeah, that was it. That's what got me invited by AE to stay.
So where were you at the time?
Utica,
New York.
Utica, New York. Yes, that's my homeland.
Yes, New York is also my homeland, kind of, but not Utica. Never been there. So thank you for giving me that little history. I want to go into one of my, I would say, like the favorite thing that I didn't know you ever did. So years ago, at some point, it came across my radar that Richard Gage had got on C-SPAN. And that to me was super cool. And I remembered somehow I found that on YouTube. It was before I was connected to anybody, but he was talking about a number of things. I thought that either the world is starting to wake up or someone like strong-armed somebody else. I just didn't understand why. And then that video got very, very popular on YouTube. Then I was watching on Amazon Prime a video that can be purchased or rented called Truther, or I Am Not a Conspiracy Theorist. And actually they talk a lot about the history of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth in there. They feature you, Kelly David, Ted Walter, Richard Gage, a bunch of people. And in there, they tell a story about how you were involved in this C-SPAN thing. So I want to give you a little bit of a chance to talk about your idea for this, how you thought about this, and then I have another clip that I want to play and talk about.
Sure. Well, the whole thing started because my mom used to watch that show, Washington Journal, and I would go to her house every morning for breakfast before I went off to work. She lived right down the street from my apartment. And anyway, so she'd watch this, and I would just notice that the few times that anybody that the mainstream media would deem a conspiracy theorist when they're talking about alternative issues such as 9/11 truth, they would sort of just fire out a bunch of things. And what the host would do, and the guests were mainly politicians and mainstream media people, is that they would pick out one thing that's easy, right? So if the person happens to mention, illegal immigration, for instance, as part of, but also has things like the Federal Reserve and 9/11, mixed in there, they'll pick out the easy topic that's sort of more mainstream, just focus on that and move on as if they didn't hear the rest. And I always just wondered for like about a year, what would happen if somebody just asked a really focused question about Building 7, for instance? So I just decided to try it. That's what I do. I like to just sometimes see what's going to happen just for my own amusement. And I called into there. I said my name was Yusuf, which is a Bosnian name, but they said Oso. But I called into McCain. I had my question ready because I
called in when John McCain was on the show, is what you're saying?
John McCain. And I called in. I asked a very focused question. I think I had some help from an engineer, some help with it and writing it. And I just read it. And of course they dodged it, but McCain gave this very big gulp because keep in mind, he wrote the foreword for the Popular Mechanics book that claims to debunk us.
Yes.
And so, if you're going to do that, you can't just dodge the question when a question about it comes up. And anyway, he ends it with, he says that I don't have any information on that, but if you write to my office and say we talked on C-SPAN, I'll get back to you. Well, anyway, this ends up resulting in us getting a meeting with McCain's office where there were a ton of people from 9/11 Truth on this call, volunteers and some of those names that, scientist names that you hear out there. And like nothing ever came of it. Obviously, McCain's dead now and he didn't ever stand up for 9/11 Truth, and we never really expected him to. But, that meeting is progress. And I was like, dang, we could let's see what happens when we do this again. And I just started doing it more and more, like my chimes.
They're nice.
But I just started doing it more and more. And then it sort of snowballed because the host, Steve Scully, said something that really ticked me off when he told them told the callers to take their calls somewhere else. Well, that just motivated me more. And I just started doing it every single day for about a year and a half. And what I would do is I'd call somebody on the AE list and be like, hi, you don't know me, but can you do this for me? I'm from AE. And when I told them I was from AE, that was like the magic words. They were like, oh my God, yes. Oh, absolutely. Good for you. I'll do it. The only times people didn't do it is if they had to work or something. But, you write up the question, the fake question to get past the screener. Yeah, there was some lying involved. All in a good cause, though, or for a good cause.
Calculated deception.
Calculated deception. I had no issue with it. But I'd give them the fake question to give to the screener, and I'd write the real question for them. They'd get on, and they would read it. And we sort of had to play some mental kung fu with the host. I had to warn them about that trick that they would use to try to ask you about something else to divert the conversation. And these people became so well trained, like soldiers. They would, by the end, they would just read the question and remain silent as we instructed them to do. And these people had nowhere to go. Well, anyway, this went on for a year and a half. I remember it was like, and it got to a point where it was almost like it was getting to be, I don't know, kind of silly. Like we would ask or people would ask the question, and then the host would just, give some kind of snotty response. And, it's like you're making bathroom noises at each other, through the phone lines on the air here. And so something needs to happen. My mom was like, okay, you've been doing this for a year and a half. I know you want to at some point stop doing this, and you just need some way to justify it to yourself. So I was like, hey, I know I've looked up the producer of the show before. Let me give her a call. So I give her a call, and I said, I think I can make the calls stop. And she said, well, how could you make the calls stop? I'm like, well, because I'm the one doing it. And she hit the roof. She's like, you're the one making all those calls? I'm like, I'm not making them, but I'm the one controlling it. Well, anyway, we had like a 3-hour conversation, but we worked out a deal that the calls would stop if they put Richard on for a good 40-minute segment. And that eventually happened in August of that year. We'd spent July getting him ready for that, doing like a fake interview. And that was so much fun because I got to be the host and I got to play the character of like this evil mainstream media person. And I was like overly nasty. I warned him I was going to do this, but I was like overly nasty to him, and he handled it really well. You know, and we all had a good laugh afterwards. But he was well prepared for it, and he did a good job on that day, and ended up becoming the #1 watched video in their entire like video archive on the website. So yeah, I'm proud of that we did that.
It's crazy when you think about it. I mean, you essentially barraged C-SPAN, Washington Journal, with so many different people that all were being fed by you this information to try to raise awareness and try to get the question out there about Building 7. To the extent that the producer of a C-SPAN show was listening to you and negotiated with you getting Richard Gage on the show. Like, I know that you tell this story like it's ordinary or like somehow this isn't over the top unbelievable, but this is, I mean, it's a really powerful story because there is a lot of strength when you have so many people calling in. And I've heard a number of the calls. I'm sad. I'm kind of sad I wasn't one of them. But it really is a huge thing that you did. And yes, it's the highest viewed C-SPAN clip on their YouTube channel currently, I think, in their archive. For people who have not, you know, heard or seen clips about C-SPAN, I want to show you, and Andy, I'm going to hijack the interview for a moment and play my favorite clip from your, you know, one of your minions, I think.
The I-35 bridge collapse in Minnesota was actually a structural defect, something called gusset plates. There were a number of things that were going on at that point with that bridge collapse. It was not really designed for the loads. They were doing construction. They had heavy equipment on the bridge. But really when it came down to it, it was the design of these plates that were flawed. So again, it was a very particular thing that I think we learned in that case. I'm afraid, though, that we didn't learn the bigger lesson of what that actually means for the rest of our infrastructure. It was not the wake-up call, frankly, that a lot of people thought it should be.
Let's go to Cheryl, New York. Pat is a Republican. Pat, good morning.
Good morning, Libby. I have a question. I am concerned about our bridges and all of our infrastructure in general. But what I'm mostly concerned about, and I have a question for you, would you please answer it for me?
What's the question?
My question is that I watch C-SPAN every morning faithfully, and I hear different callers call in periodically about the 9/11 Building 7, and I'm wondering why does C-SPAN have a policy of not wanting to answer any of these questions? Because when a person mentions this, you either call them some conspiracy person or else you deflect them with a different question so that the guest doesn't have to answer. And I'm wondering why, is this a policy C-SPAN has?
No, Pat, it's not a policy at all. And sometimes we try to stay on topic if we have someone on talking about a specific thing, but it's not a policy, and we want to invite all conversation topics. Sometimes callers call in and tell our screener they're going to talk about one thing, then they talk about something else when they get on the air. But we welcome your opinions and thoughts. Did you have any questions or comments for James Corliss this morning?
Well, in terms of the bridges collapsing, like the one you cited about Minnesota, there was Building 7 that collapsed without a plane even hitting it. And I think many families and supporters of trying to get into investigation about why this building would just suddenly collapse, I wonder why no one will answer these questions for these people.
Well, and we have actually had people answer those questions on this program before. James Corliss, did you want to weigh in on that at all? Is there anything that relates to infrastructure that you can comment on?
I'll tell you what, and I certainly would I don't know enough certainly about exactly what happened on the site, but another tragedy just last fall was Superstorm Sandy, and that was what I was thinking about in terms.
There we go. So that's my favorite clip from everything I've seen of the what I call, the Battle of C-SPAN or whatever. What I love about that caller is, obviously you can hear she's articulate. She sounds like an older woman, and she seems very authentic in her, delivery of her questions, and she really wants to know. So do you want to talk a little bit about that clip?
I will absolutely talk about that. And I was told that I couldn't say who this was until after she passed away, and sadly she did a couple of years ago. But I do have free reign now to talk about it. So here's how this all happened. I had set up a caller to call into Congressman Quayler, who did an earlier interview in that episode. And I had warned the caller, they're going to try to divert you with other topics. Don't let them. But he called in. He asked the Building 7 question. Host Libby Casey there says, "Oh, we'll get to that in a second, but what do you think about illegal immigration? You're in Texas." And he said, I called about Building 7. And then she insists, "Yeah, I know. But, what do you think of illegal immigration?" He gives a one-line answer to that and then ends it with, "But back to my original question, please." And then Congressman Quayler just goes on and answers the question about illegal immigration. They don't, address it at all. So I was a little irked, a little mad about this. I was watching this with my mom, and I really wanted to call in when they brought in this engineer and confront them on this. But I knew I was really angry. I didn't want to go on TV and make an ass of myself, and my mom was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll handle it. Just, go have a cup of coffee or whatever. I'll handle it." I did. I went to the other room, and she called into C-SPAN, and she did that. That was my mom.
Your mother.
My mother did. And
your mother is Pat from New York.
My mom is Pat Steele from New York, yes. And the funny thing about my mom is that she woke up to 9/11 at the same time that I did. When I was watching these videos, I was back from the Peace Corps because we had been kicked out of the country because the whole country, all the Americans had been evacuated because of the
out of Uzbekistan
uprising that happened and John massacre. So I just kind of was suddenly plopped back into America. I didn't know where to go, so I went to went and lived with my mom for a little while. And that's when I woke up to 9/11. And so when I would, at the time, she was working her last year of being a teacher in elementary school, and I wasn't employed yet. So I was sitting around watching this stuff during the day. And when she would come home, I would already have her tea made, and I would be like, "You have to watch it. We got everything for you. Dinner's taken care of, because I don't want there's 3 films you got to watch right now. Tell me if I'm crazy. This makes a lot of sense." And we would watch the 9/11 film. So we woke up at the same time. And I remember her famously saying, because we're watching it on my laptop, and she's got a big screen TV, and she's saying, "People pay all this money for big TVs and these cable packages, and the only thing that you can get any real information from is this tiny little screen right here." And she was right. But yeah, so she called into C-SPAN and just handled it. I learned a big lesson that day about sometimes when you're too emotionally involved with something, it's smarter to just step back, and if someone's willing to, just let them deal with it. But she knocked it right out of the park, and it was funny.
She did knock it out of the park.
She did, yeah. And she really twisted it too, because they kind of, turned her back on Corliss and said, "Do you have any questions about the bridge collapse?" And then she just kind of dialed up again and asked about Building 7. So she sunk her teeth in.
And it was even appropriate. I mean, when you're talking about engineering failures or infrastructure failures, that's what happened that day. You literally had a building fall for what reason? Office fires is what they say, which, it's kind of weird that never happened before or since with a steel frame high-rise falling because of office fires. And I like that your mom had that, she had that attitude. It's really cool that she did that and that she took an interest in it, but also it shows that this isn't something that, only a younger generation can understand. Obviously, as a teacher, she had a good grasp of knowledge and understanding and history. I think it's impressive that she did that. So I'm very sorry about the loss of your mom, but I'm sure you're very proud of that clip.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, when I was a kid, she rented the Oliver Stone JFK film. That was back in the Blockbuster days when you had 2 VHS cassettes rubber banded together. And she made me watch that. And she was like, someday they're going to release, I forgot, whatever files, and you need to make sure that happens. I was like, Mom, I'm not going to have any control over that, but whatever. Okay. But she was all into the JFK stuff. She told me a story one time about when RFK was running, and some guy, she was a very pretty lady, and some guy comes up and starts hitting on her. There she was at a bar, and this guy was all into the election, and he said, what do you think about RFK? You think he's going to win? And she said, I think if he gets anywhere close to winning, someone's going to shoot him. And the guy treated her like he was like, okay, and like got up and left, and that's what happened. So she was open to a lot of the stuff for a very long time. And, she was talking about, not overly so, not too much, but, at a time when all I cared about were comic books and pro wrestling, she would kind of mention these things and all of that. And I have her to thank for planting the seed of questioning mainstream narratives.
It's heartwarming, actually. But of course, I mean, losing mom is very hard. So I just love that memory of her and Libby Casey and
she hated Libby Casey. Yeah.
It's her memory will live on forever. She did good work. And then of course, after that, I mean, Richard Gage was after, those conversations. So the proof is in the pudding. You did it. I mean, you won the battle with them. I think it's really impressive that somehow you I don't want to say weaseled your way in. You outsmarted them, I guess.
There's a little bit of weaseling, a little bit of strong arming, a little bit of deception, but it was all for a good cause. And, the thing is like, why are they even, I can understand why you screen it to a certain extent. You don't want people to go on there and curse or, do some prank or whatever, but it's a very legitimate issue. And of course it deserves the full attention of the American public, which we gave it.
Sure. Well, we've been talking for a while and I don't want to make this go too long, over an hour. So we're at this part.
Okay.
This is a book that I have that is called Born on 11 by Andy Steele. I got this from the AE store and I have read the whole thing. This came out a few years ago and I've never known anyone who has written a graphic novel, and I had never read a graphic novel, but this is actually really cool. So I would like you to talk about this. And I like how it even has the AE symbol on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like is it commissioned by AE?
Well, yeah. I mean, we worked with, I forgot the name of the publishing company, but AE, AE was the one who produced it. It was the organization that produced it. Basically, when did we put that out? 2021, around the 20th anniversary. And yeah, I'm very proud of it. And I don't know what else to say.
We'll talk a little bit about it. So it's a fictional graphic novel that is about a young man. And the story, at least as I understood it after reading it, the purpose is to inspire people, give people information about 9/11. It highlights some interesting themes, and I just kind of want to know what in the world inspired you to undertake such a huge process. I mean, this book is not brief. There is a tremendous amount of artwork in here. You did this whole thing yourself. So, I mean, you must have had some purpose for this. I mean, obviously your want for 9/11 truth, but like graphic novel.
I'll tell you how this happened. So, I don't know, maybe 2016 or so. There's a lot of stressful things that go on behind the scenes here. I don't talk about it, but
at AE 9/11 truth, like working on the staff.
Yeah, we don't just sit around watching YouTubes of 9/11. There's a lot of work and a lot of things that go on, and it wears on you. And I was playing around with some art stuff one day, just playing, and I showed my mom. I was here visiting for Christmas, And she was like, you used to like doing that, because I used to draw comics in college. And she's like, you used to like doing that kind of stuff. I'd like to see you do more of that, So during my Christmas vacation, I was still working, but I was down here in Arizona. I played around, was producing more pictures. I came up with this process for doing it. And then there was this program, and my mom's like, I was going to buy it. And she's like, I'm going to buy it for you. No, I'm going to, because I need you to see you do something else, other than 9/11. You got to do some, get, something that's not associated with all that. And so I got the layout program, Clip Studio. And anyway, then it occurred to me, this thing I'm not supposed to be doing for 9/11, I could do a 9/11 thing with it. And it was just going to be a very short comic book, just as sort of like a test, to test my own art. And then, something cool that AE could say we have. And it was not going to be more than 30 pages. And then I started writing the script. And I was like, oh, man, it's going to be a much longer story than I expected. So by the time I was done, it didn't take me too long to write the script for it. But by the time I was done, it was like over 200 pages, the script. And Kelly David was very supportive of the idea. I didn't talk about it much. Sometimes I would show pictures or whatever, and more just like, hey, this look cool, the way the shadows fall on this guy's face and everything.
And Kelly is the former director of operations of AE?
Well, she was the former chief operating officer. Yeah, and she was very supportive. I would be like, okay, I changed the scene from a restaurant to a strip club. Is that okay? She's like, as long as they don't lose any more clothes than that, you're fine. And she, and so she was very, very helpful and very supportive during the whole process. And I talked about it a little bit, but the idea was that I was going to try to put this out, and it would be one extra cool thing we could have around the 20th anniversary. So I worked on it for a long time, because there's, other duties that you got to do here at AE. And so whenever I got a chance, so I didn't sleep for very much for a couple of years. And, I finally got it done around that time, and we put it out, and people seemed to like it. So I'm very proud. And, the reason I thought we needed this is that, we needed our own JFK, our own fictionalized story, even though the JFK story is actually based on true events with Jim Garrison going after Clay Shaw for the association to the conspiracy. We needed our own thing like that. And I couldn't produce a movie. We don't have those kinds of resources, but I could do this. Yeah. And, I had a lot of fun with the characters, and I just enjoyed the entire process. And getting to the end of it was great, because I was like, oh God, finally done. So
it is great, actually. I had it, I bought it because I wanted to, I had it or got it somehow in support of AE. And then it was a while before I read it. And then once I actually read it, it was like a day. I mean, it's once you start in on it, I remember, I think Emily was my favorite character. And I just really got attached to the characters. I mean, Kevin and Emily, I really enjoyed it. I had never read a comic book or a graphic novel before, and I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe that it would be kind of like, I don't know, childish, but no, that is not at all. This is a very serious story, a worthwhile story, and it, in a way, I think using fiction to also convey other true information about 9/11 in the World Trade Center is like a helpful vehicle, because you don't have to talk about something that actually really did happen. You're talking about something that could have happened, or something that happened to somebody else. I think it was a really interesting tool to raise awareness.
Well, it's a way to put everything together. It's a way to put everything together from my experiences, but experiences of other people, and sort of personify too some of the obstacles that we run into. Like the main villain sort of represents the mainstream media, that kind of thing. So it's kind of fun to take like certain elements that we run into as roadblocks and actually create a person out of them. To basically show how difficult the struggle really is, and how far we have come too in overcoming those obstacles. So yeah, that's why it's so fun and why I think I just thought it was needed. That's why we did it.
I'm glad you did it. It really was needed. And I'm glad that you could use all those literary devices to the advantage of the story. I know we've been talking for almost an hour, but before we go, mostly, I mean, I have seen, I don't know, almost all of your free falls in the recent years. You run your video podcast for Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and you do that pretty regularly. There are videos that are out on the YouTube channel and or the website that you know have either helped make or made. Tell me about where AE is headed and what your vision is for your role in AE moving forward, as a way looking into the future from where we are right now.
Oh, we're in round 9 of a 15-round fight. I mean, this is Rocky versus Drago, this battle for 9/11 truth. And I know that there are forces that don't want us to exist. They want to throw everything at us, including the kitchen sink and the plunger. But we still remain standing, and we are even getting more information out there and doing a lot of things. We've got Project Due Diligence, which is the engineers that are going around the country, giving presentations, talking to other engineers. That's really what things like the book you're citing and the films and all of that are done in order to support. We're still waiting to see what happens with the Supreme Court here. There will be a bulletin saying that we've gotten through a couple of the first steps. It has not been rejected. They're going to be discussing it at a conference on April the 26th. I guess this is all part of the process. And they're going to be deciding if they want to.
It's this week.
Yeah, it's coming up.
That's like Thursday or Friday. Thursday?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know what the day is, but I know the
You're
date.
saying that the Supreme Court of the United States of America is going to be.
Well, they're going to decide if they're going to take it. It's not going to be all. They're not going to be hearing the case or anything yet.
They'll decide if they're going to take it.
Yeah, they're just going to decide if they're going to take it. So, I'm waiting for that date with bated breath. I don't know if we're going to find out on the date what they decided to do, but it should be around that time. Now, that's what's interesting about it is that, and if you followed 9/11 Freefall out there, we've discussed it, where in our case against NIST, the lower court said that federal agency reports are not required to be scientifically sound as long as they meet statutory requirements. So that means that unless Congress explicitly says that the data has to be accurate, the conclusions have to be based on verifiable input and data, that they can get away with putting out false reports as long as they put out a report. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. Obviously, that doesn't hold water with a free country and a government that's accountable to the people of it. So we are challenging that. We're bringing this to the Supreme Court. So AE finds itself now in this weird position where we've been advocating for this very difficult issue, World Trade Center evidence, and we're at the forefront of that issue. But now we also have this constitutional issue that we champion, which basically affects any groups out there that are doing a similar thing to us. Let's say it's an environmental group challenging a government report.
Sure.
Or, anything else, anything in which science sits at the center, and government proclamations are challenged. So this is very important. You're not going to hear about it in the mainstream media, but this is super important. We've got a lot of great supporters out there who donated to us to fund the Supreme Court case, and they're really investing in their future when they do this. And I don't like to give up, so I may have a few tricks up our sleeve if this doesn't go our way, if the Supreme Court doesn't hear this case too. So I just tell your watchers to stay tuned, and be more about that later.
Well, Andy, you certainly don't seem like a guy that gives up. You've been working at this for over 15 years, and I admire your work. I admire what you did with C-SPAN. I admire what you've done with Freefall. I admire a lot of writing that comes out of AE. I don't know if it's from you or not, but I mean, you guys have a lot of quality, And I think what you're doing is so important. So it was really an honor to hear from you today. Is there anything else that you want to leave with the viewers, about 9/11? We're almost 25 years later, and the audience of AE. Anything you want to share before we go?
Obviously, 9/11 is still very important. It mutilated the future of our country and of our world. Right now, I am very concerned about the possibility of World War III breaking out for the first time ever in my life. It's actually something that people see as could happen. I think that 9/11 sits at the heart of all the current events, and we need to keep on hammering this. And I want to tell the audience, believe in yourself. It does not matter what the mainstream media says. It doesn't matter what other people say. If you have an idea or you think it's something that you want to do and you want to do it, you got to try it. If it's something, obviously you don't want to cause any harm to anyone or do anything violent, but just try to do whatever you can and don't let the naysayers get to you. Some people don't do anything other than convert oxygen to carbon dioxide, but they can complain and nag, and that's pretty much all they do. You just tune that out of your head and do your thing, and you'll be okay.
Well, thank you, Andy. I'm so grateful that you have not stopped hammering it away at this cause. If it hadn't been for people like you, I don't know if I would be even involved or would have considered to get involved in something like this. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing your next episode of Free Fall, and I appreciate just everything that you've done for this cause and for AE. Thank you so much for joining me here today for this little interview. I appreciate your stories, and seeing you get cursed out by a newscaster was truly memorable.
Thank you.
So thank you, Andy, and we'll take care here.